Something I've noticed lately is that people talk every single day, but it still somehow feels like nobody's really saying anything. And I know that sounds really strange because technically we are more connected now than ever before. We text constantly, we post constantly, we react to every single thing. We know what people are eating, where they are going, what they are wearing. But somehow, real conversations still feel very rare. Actual conversations where people genuinely open up. And maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot of people are becoming harder to reach emotionally, not just physically, but emotionally too, as I've said earlier. The fact that you can be sitting beside somebody right now and still feel very far away from them. And honestly, I think everybody is tired in different ways. Some people are tired mentally, some are tired emotionally, some financially. In fact, some are just tired of pretending they are okay all the time. But because everybody has mastered looking fine, nobody really knows who needs help anymore. And I also think social media has contributed to that in so many ways, because now people feel pressure to always appear happy, to appear productive, attractive, and successful, even when life is actually falling apart behind the scenes. And after a while, you get so used to showing people the polished version of yourself that you almost forget how to be honest. And you know what's actually funny? Sometimes people will post best day ever and then cry themselves to sleep that same night, and no one would ever know. Not because people are trying to deceive others, but it's just because somewhere along the line, everybody started feeling like vulnerability makes you weak. So sometimes instead of saying, I'm struggling, you just say, I'm tired. Instead of saying, I feel lonely, people distract themselves from that loneliness. Also, instead of saying, I'm overwhelmed, people make jokes about it. And honestly, I actually understand it, because opening up can be very scary, especially nowadays people barely know how to hold safe conversations anymore. Sometimes you tell someone something personal, and instead of listening, they start comparing it to their own experiences immediately, or they try to minimize it, or they just turn it into a gist. So eventually, people stop talking. And I think that's why small moments of genuine connection feel so powerful now. When someone actually listens carefully while you're talking, not looking at their phones every 2 seconds. When you're just fully present right there while somebody is talking to you. That kind of thing feels rare these days. Even friendships feel different now. I just really think adulthood changes relationships in ways nobody prepares you for. Everybody becomes busy. People are dealing with personal problems privately. People trying to catch up with schedules, and sometimes you slowly drift from people you genuinely thought would always be around. And it's not actually because of fight, and not because anybody did something terrible to you. Life just happens. And honestly, I think one of the hardest things about growing older is realizing that not every relationship is meant to stay the same forever. Some people were only part of certain seasons of your life, and that realization can feel really strange, especially when you still care about them. You know what else I've really noticed? A lot of people miss people, but they never reach out. Pride stops some people. Overthinking stops others. And sometimes you even convince yourself if they cared, they would text first. I know I'm actually trying to break a lot of tables here, but yeah, the other person is thinking the exact same thing. And slowly, that is when distance begins to grow. And I believe human beings naturally want connection. Everybody wants to feel understood. Everybody wants to feel seen. Even the people who act like they don't care. And maybe that is why loneliness feels so heavy these days. Because loneliness is not always about being alone physically. Sometimes you can be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally disconnected from them. And I also think a lot more people experience that than they admit it. There are people who laugh loudly in public but go home feeling empty. People who constantly encourage everybody else but secretly feel exhausted themselves. People who look confident online but deeply struggle with insecurity. I mean, different kinds of insecurities. And honestly, I wish people felt more comfortable being human. Not perfect, just human. I also wish people felt less pressure to always have everything figured out, because nobody truly has life figured out. Everything feels so fast now. Everybody's rushing to succeed, rushing to move on, rushing to become somebody in life. Even now, resting feels like something people feel guilty for. I mean, you'll be relaxing for 1 hour and suddenly feel like your life is wasting away because somebody online is already announcing a new achievement. And I don't think that constant comparison is healthy, because people are quietly measuring their lives against edited versions of strangers. And after a while, it begins to affect how people see themselves. Suddenly, you feel behind, not because your life is bad, but it's actually because you are watching everybody else's highlight their achievements constantly. And honestly, sometimes I think people need to disconnect more. I don't mean permanently. I mean just enough to hear themselves think again. Because when there's too much noise around you, you stop listening to yourself. You stop asking yourself important questions like, what actually makes me happy? What kind of life do I genuinely want? What version of myself am I becoming? Different questions like that. Instead, people just keep moving without reflecting. And maybe that is why so many people feel emotionally disconnected from themselves lately. I don't know. These are just things I think about sometimes. And I wanted this podcast to be a place where conversations like this can exist naturally, not forced, not motivational speeches every second. I'm not even here to motivate anybody, but I just want it to be a space where there's no pretense. I just want something deep, just honest conversations about things people quietly experience but rarely say out loud. Because sometimes hearing someone express your exact thoughts makes you feel less alone. And honestly, I think that is important. I think people need spaces where they can relax mentally for a moment and just feel understood. That is part of what I want this podcast to become. A calm space, real conversations, real thoughts, real people. And eventually, I'd love to bring people onto this podcast to share real life experiences too, not just success stories. I really want conversations about growth, mistakes, healings, disappointments, lessons, all of it, because everybody has a story. And sometimes somebody else's story can help people more than perfect advice ever could. So, if you're listening to this and there's something you've experienced, something you've learned from, or even something you're currently figuring out, you can always send it to my email, makonjola877@gmail.com. makonjola877@gmail.com. So maybe one day we'll talk about it here. But yes, that's today's conversation, and honestly, thank you so much for listening. And before you go, always remember that the softest conversations carry the hardest truth. See you in my next episode. Bye.
Finally.